A stage play opens with a narration describing a war before each character is introduced on one of two giant screens on either side of the stage. After the roster finishes, the title card of the play, Tokyo Blade, flashes on the screen quickly, followed by a glimpse of a tragic scene: Princess Saya's death in Tuki's arms. This moment transitions into Aqua's recollection of the first day of rehearsals, where he and Akane are practicing that very scene. Meanwhile, Ruby visits Ai's grave, reflecting on B. Kamachi's rising fame and Aqua's burgeoning acting career. She speaks to her mother about her determination to perform at Tokyo Dome, resolute in carrying on Ai's legacy. Are you excited for the recap already? Let's do this. As Aqua delves into the script, he notices the dynamics of their roles. He and Akane are cast as the antagonists, while Kana takes a spot among the protagonists. The play is an adaptation of the Shibuya conflict arc, a popular manga storyline. Aqua's mind, however, is solely focused on acting as a tool to uncover the truth about Ai's murder, rendering him distant during Akane's attempts to engage him. The producer Raida and director Kindaichi evaluate the cast's performances during rehearsals. Despite initial doubts, Aqua and Melt show promise. Raida is particularly excited about a potential showdown between Kana, the former child prodigy, and Akane, the current acting sensation. But Kindaichi cautions Raida not to overlook Taiki Himekawa, another key player. As Taiki and Kana rehearse, their on-stage chemistry is undeniable, causing Akane to realize she underestimated Kana's talents. By the third day of rehearsals, the cast begins to form cliques, though Aqua remains isolated, quietly observing Kana's adaptability in her scenes with Taiki. Akane, feeling a twinge of jealousy, questions Aqua, who explains that Kana's acting molds to her scene partners, elevating her performance to new heights. Akane, frustrated by Aqua's remarks, retorts that he'll face the same challenge. But Aqua, aware of his limitations, remains uninterested in competing with those who possess real acting talent. Akane struggles with her portrayal of Princess Saya, especially with the deviations from the original manga. Kindaichi pushes her to bring more intensity, but her frustration only grows. On the fifth day, scriptwriter Goa arrives and Aqua seizes the chance to voice Akane's concerns. Goa admits the adaptations were necessary for the stage, but offers to make revisions, though Kindaichi insists on sticking with the action-centric script. Later, the cast meets special guests, mangakas Yoriko Kichijuji and Abiko Samejima. Yoriko greets Kana and Aqua warmly, but her demeanor towards Melt is notably colder. As they observe the rehearsals, Abiko, while impressed, requests a small revision, the entire script. Before the first rehearsal, Aqua and Kana are surprised to run into Melt on their way there. He immediately picks up on Kana's less-than-enthusiastic response due to his utterly horrific performance on the set of Sweet Today. But it's been 9 months, and he's been studying up, so he asks them to let him know if he's still shite. The three of them arrive together and introduce themselves. An incredibly chipper man waltzes in after them, introducing himself as Raida, who's in charge of everything, and proceeds to introduce the director, Kindaichi, and the scriptwriter, Goa, before going through the rest of the cast. Akane eyes up Kana, and the lead, Himekawa, is woken up by a swift kick from the director. Aqua isn't too thrilled by Akane's enthusiasm. Kana is even less so. Melt, oblivious to the situation, points out that they're apparently dating after their stint on the reality show. This only sends Kana, who rightfully points out that they do technically appear to be dating. Melt doesn't help by mentioning that their characters are supposed to be engaged, causing Kana to go on an unhinged rant briefly. Elsewhere, Yoriko and Abiko discuss productions adapting their work over drinks. Since it's Abiko's first time, she asks Yoriko, her former boss, if she'll attend the rehearsal of Tokyo Blade with her. Yoriko is familiar with the give and take between the creator and production crew, but worries about Abiko being a bit too out there, which is vindicated when she asks to revise the entire script. GAO apologizes for the script but tries to defend his rewrites, which don't serve to placate her. She ends up arguing with her editor and the director in another room as Yoriko laments the process of adapting media. Despite Abiko's fervor in her revisions, the number of intermediaries makes it a terrible game of translating and retranslating intent. By the time it gets to the scriptwriter, most of the anger and passion are stripped away from the author's suggestions. Abiko demands to revise the script herself, or else they can scrap the whole thing. Zhao listens to the conversation through the door, along with Yoriko and Aqua, who asks if he's cool with being kicked off the project. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter how the scriptwriter feels. Despite pouring countless hours into the process and often spending more time than they even get paid for to write the script in the first place, they're often given no respect and treated abhorrently by fans and authors alike. He accepts the reality but wishes to get his name scrubbed from the credits. No dice, too expensive. Oh well. Somehow he still blames himself, regardless of how much effort he put into making everyone happy, while creating a good adaptation for the stage. The following day, the director tells the cast that rehearsals are off until the new script is finished. Akane is shocked when Aqua demonstrates a pitiful lack of knowledge and interest in stage plays. So, since he has no idea what a stage-around production is, she decides to take him on a date to see one together. She takes him to see Smash Heaven, which smashes Aqua's perception of what theater can be. Seeing a show in a stage-around venue was like nothing he'd ever seen before. Having the entire floor rotate made changing sets a breeze, which upped their overall quality, something a film couldn't capture. After, Akane and Aqua discuss the experience when Raida approaches them. It turns out that he's in charge of the show they just saw. They ask him how Tokyo Blade's script is going, and things don't seem too great. Aqua now understands the differing skill sets it takes to write for the stage and to write a manga, which causes him to conclude that Abiko just isn't cut out for scriptwriting, especially when he finds out that GOA wrote the script for Smash Heaven. They head home, and Aqua attributes the script debacle to a communication breakdown and believes he can tip the scales and get things back on track. There's one person Abiko might listen to, Yoriko. So Kana and Melt join the two to visit Yoriko. His rationale is that creatives, when they get too big too quickly, often won't listen to people outside of their specific field, so Yoriko might be the perfect person to get through to the stubborn mangaka. It turns out that Abiko is terrible with people. Even as Yoriko's assistant, she wasn't very apt at communicating, so it's easy to see where she's coming from, especially being extremely proud of her work. She doesn't think that talking to Abiko will change her mind, but Aqua kind of figured that already, so instead, he brought a mysterious envelope to give to her. Yoriko accepts the mission and decides to visit the shut-in. When she arrives, Abiko is working on her weekly installment of Tokyo Blade. Yoriko is worried since the deadline has passed and decides to help despite Abiko's protests. Since she's very opinionated, every assistant her editor tries to get her to hire doesn't last very long. She's been working almost non-stop, and it's starting to get to her. Yoriko becomes annoyed after Abiko insults her manga's lower performance, so the two talk smack back and forth throughout the night. After finishing the work, they end up apologizing to each other for crossing the line one too many times, but acknowledge that anybody else would have dipped out on them for even thinking half the shite they said. Yoriko ends up comforting Abiko, who thinks that Sweet Today didn't live up to her reverence for the manga. But Yoriko says she's glad that it got made regardless, and gives Abiko Aqua's envelope. It turns out that it contains a ticket to see Smash Heaven. So, Abiko decides to see the show. When it lets out, Raida is notified of Abiko's presence in the theater and sets up a quick meeting with the mangaka. At first, he tries to butter her up and praise her genius, but Aqua's words resonate in his head. He's probably the only one with enough leverage to pressure her. He quickly changes tone and requests they have a serious discussion. As the showrunner, he has multiple people counting on him for their jobs, and whatever she writes will most likely be used regardless of how awful it translates to the stage. If she doesn't want to look bad while making everyone else look bad, it might be a good idea to work with GOA, especially since he was the one who wrote Smash Heaven. This new information seems to sway Abiko as she remembers Yoriko telling her to meet them halfway. That these sorts of things are ultimately an exercise in collaboration. So she decides to defer to the professional On one condition, Raida obliges and sets up a mediated video call so the two can collaborate. At first, he's worried that things might go south fast, but it seems as though the theater experience was a bit of a wake-up call. Abiko begins to cede ground and listens to Goei's expertise regarding writing for performance, and the two get along far better than before. When all's said and done, they've spent the entire night rewriting the script, which is what Raida feared. However, he's glad they can work together and produce something that might turn out even better than anything they wrote solo. When the actors get their hands on the script, most of them are happy with the changes. But when Aqua's performance is called out by the director, he's not so sure he can pull it off. He's never had to do emotional acting before. Akane tries to console him, but Kana tears into him, pointing out his seeming inability to show his emotions. When he asks what he should do, she tells him to think about things that bring up specific emotions like, "What if your mom died? How would you feel?" The sudden shock of trauma flooding his mind causes him to pause. The scene of his mother's gruesome murder flashes in his mind. A shadowy figure of his former self looms over him, unwilling to let him forget that he could have done more to save her. Aqua collapses under the crushing weight of guilt. He excuses himself, and the director sends Akane after him. She tries to get him to go home, but he doesn't want Ruby to find out. So instead, the two head to Gotanda's place. They put him down to rest, and after learning that Akane's his girlfriend Gotanda opens up a bit about how he knows Aqua's situation best. Later, Akane tends to his bedside, where she hears him muttering Ai's name under his breath. She starts to piece things together and realizes that the rumors about Ai having a kid might not be so ridiculous after all. When he wakes up, he finds her crying, but she dismisses any explanation and hugs him, promising to always be on his side. Akane makes dinner for everyone, including Gotanda's mother, who tells Aqua to lock that down. Afterward, Akane asks to see some of Aqua's acting, but Gotanda is apprehensive and only agrees with Aqua's permission. To his surprise, Aqua seems indifferent to showing her, as long as he isn't in the room. She notices that his performance seems prepared beforehand, and Gotanda relays how Aqua would panic if he tried to get emotional. Akane goes to talk with her boyfriend and wants to know why he got into acting in the first place. At first, he doesn't want to tell her because she'll think it's crazy, but after a bit of prodding, he admits that he got into acting to kill someone higher up in the industry. She doesn't seem fazed in the slightest and immediately offers to help. Aqua is shocked that she'd casually commit to something like that, but she kind of plays it off like she's been that kind of crazy this whole time. She does want something from him, though, a fulfilling of his boyfriend duties, as it were. She wants to beat Kana and Taiki. Acting, of course, not physically. He agrees. They show Gotanda the script, and Aqua asks for advice. Unfortunately, the only advice he has is to perform as the script dictates, which entails emotional acting. Gotanda agrees to help, however, and they commit to practicing every day after rehearsals. After another rehearsal, Melt gets hung up on his shite performance on Sweet Today. When he goes to clear his head over a walk, he bumps into Ruby, who's looking for her brother. She recognizes Melt, who tells her that Aqua's been leaving with Akane after rehearsals. Minami, who tagged along, suggests they've been engaging in boyfriend-girlfriend activities since he doesn't get home until midnight. This sends Ruby into a tizzy, causing Minami to regret even mentioning it. At another rehearsal, Kana starts to stir the pot with Akane, even going so far as to produce an old magazine containing an interview where Akane cites her as her influence to become an actor. The two exchange some heated words, so Aqua and Melt end up stepping in to separate them. Kana vents to Melt and Taiki about the fundamental difference in her and Akane's approach to acting. She feels the need to win against Akane to prove she isn't some washed-up child actor. Melt asks Taiki what he thinks, and he responds that they're evenly matched, but Kana will win since she's with him. Sakuya goads Melt, trashing his pitiful acting skills. He asks Kana for help, to which she agrees, while Aqua and Akane head to Gotanda's place. On opening day, Yoriko and Abiko run into GOA before heading inside. He tries to calm her nerves, by telling her that there are at least 2 people who find the script entertaining, but it falls on the actors now. Inside, Ruby sits down with Miyako, excited to see her brother perform, when they notice Gotanda, finding it odd that he came, as it must mean that Aqua invited him. Gotanda wonders if Aqua can pull this off, but remembers how seriously he really takes things. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Kana confesses that she's glad to be acting with Akane again, but that doesn't mean she won't win. Akane shares the same sentiment, as she's waited for this a long time. In the dressing room, Aqua gets ready by looking at pictures of Ai to send himself into a panic. The shadow of his past self remains, holding that crushing guilt over his head. But he resolves to use it to his advantage, to make up the difference for his lack of talent. The lights go down, and the narrator begins detailing the conflict central to the play's plot. On screen, the cast is introduced one by one. The play opens with Taiki as Blade, who stumbles upon a glowing sword stuck in the ground. Kana, as Tsurugi, appears and threatens to battle him if he picks up the sword. Of course, his immediate reaction is to pick up the blade. It is his namesake, after all. The two clash, and Tsurugi explains that the sword is an oath sword, one that grants its wielder great power. Whoever is acknowledged by all oath swords as the strongest will take possession of the country. Fancying himself a king, Blade is all too happy to take on that challenge. He goes on the offensive and easily takes Tsurugi out in a few decisive blows. After admitting defeat, Blade allows her to join him. The two set off towards Shinjuku, a place contended by rival warlords. She tells him that if he can beat Kizami, the place is practically his. When they arrive, Blade faces Melt as Kizami and easily overpowers him. Kizami asks to join them, to which Blade agrees. Kizami explains how the Shibuya Oni drove them underground, and Blade responds by swearing to vanquish them. During the second act, Kizami faces off with Sakuya as Monmi. Melt acknowledges Sakuya's acting chops, playing a character so unlike his own. Kaburagai showed up during rehearsals, where Raida praised him for suggesting Sakuya, who acts as an inspiration for the others. He goes on to praise his recommendation of Kana and Aqua too. However, he isn't quite sold on Melt. Kaburagai admits it was a bit personal pushing for the kid, but figured he'd grow on him. Though the one focused most on his performance is Yoriko, due to his terrible role in the adaptation of her manga Sweet Today. In school, Melt became aware of his popularity early on, so when he took up acting, he wasn't really thinking it through, just winging it. During their fight, Yoriko and Sakuya bemoan his lackluster performance. But over the past few weeks, he's been practicing especially hard for the role. He even asked Aqua for advice, who told him not to care if they think he sucks. Melt went off on him. But Aqua continued, telling him to take advantage of people not taking him seriously. Since his one big moment is the fight at the beginning of the second act, he should focus all his energy on his performance, after goading the audience into thinking he's awful. When Monmei disarms Kizami, the moment he picks up the blade again is his time to shine. Backstage, Kana wonders if it was Aqua's doing, but he gives the credit to Melt, who took his advice and ran with it. After rearming himself, Melt goes hard. The audience is taken aback. Even Abiko is excited to see her panels come to life. While preparing for the role, Melt went over the manga again and realized that he empathized with the character a great deal more than he initially thought. He decides to channel the frustration he's been feeling into 1 minute of intense acting. At first, Sakuya isn't having it, but his shell begins to melt when he can't ignore the overwhelming emotion behind each strike, powerful enough to reach the audience. He finally understands conviction, and it shows. Even Yoriko can't help but tear up as the audience erupts in applause. Backstage, Melt begins to apologize for ad-libbing, but Sakuya takes him off guard and shows him respect. He turns to Aqua and tells him he finally understands. He's even having fun for the first time. Thank you guys for sticking till the end of this video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button for more videos like this. Cheers!